Shinnosuke and Hashimoto Daiki are headed to the World Gymnastics Championships. Zhang Boheng is the Chinese all-around champion. The U.S. Senior Selection Committee had to reevaluate their national team selection from Winter Cup thanks to a grievance, and European Championships and Canadian Championships are happening next week. For those new here, I'm Kensley, the host of Neutral Deductions, a podcast all about men's gymnastics. This is episode 71, where I recap so much gymnastics news. So I am sorry that this podcast is coming out a little bit later than usual, but I have been waiting for Chinese championships to wrap up so that I could put all of the results into this one podcast, as next week is going to be almost exclusively dedicated to European Gymnastics Championships. Also, a little bit of personal news for those who don't follow me on social media. So most of the listeners do know that I worked with NBC at the Olympic Games last year as a researcher for Justin Spring and Lori Hernandez. And our entire production won an Emmy for Outstanding Live Special Championship. I'm in actual disbelief. I have 3 degrees in music. So if you would have asked me at one point in my life if there was one of the major awards I thought I might maybe potentially ever have the possibility to win, it definitely would have been a Grammy. I still can't believe I won an Emmy. And I think the thing for me that is so special that I want to share with you, for any of you who have doubt about what people say you can or you can't do, or you just need a little bit of extra motivation, one of my professors during my PhD told me that I would never be able to do musicians' health research and gymnastics journalism at the same time. And he was insistent that I drop gymnastics journalism. And I didn't listen, because I love both of these things. I love creating research that helps make the musician occupation a healthier and safer place. And I love covering men's gymnastics. And not only did this week I win an Emmy for gymnastics, but my 6th peer-reviewed article for Musicians Health Research is also coming out this month. So some really cool things happening over here. Again, thank you all for the continued support for this whole journey. And also, I just want to share this in case you have people in your life telling you, I don't understand why you're doing X, Y, and Z. It doesn't make sense. You should pick one career or the other, or I don't think you're going to be able to do those things. It happens every day that people prove other people wrong just because their superiors don't have the vision that they have for their world. So on to the massive gymnastics recap, because today we have so much to cover. The first thing that we're going to cover is the NHK trophy for Japan, which also served as part of their world team selection. So the NHK trophy is the second of 2 competitions to solidify part of their World Gymnastics Championships team, and also solidified the World University Games team. So the first competition of this process was the All Japan Championships, which we covered earlier this year, where Hashimoto Daiki won over Shinnosuke. So at the NHK trophy, the Olympic Channel started reporting that Hashimoto Daiki had showed up to NHK trophy with a mysterious illness that he had had for 10 days. And it was so severe that Hashimoto's coach actually asked him to sit out. But Hashimoto wanted to try and make the world gymnastics team, as Japan is famous for kind of this idea, if you don't compete, you don't earn a spot on the national team. Now, there certainly have been some exceptions over the years. So last year at the NHK trophy, Hashimoto had to pull out due to injuring his finger, and he still was named to the Olympic team. However, based on the information that we've been able to procure for this year, there isn't an exception for this year's policy. As a non-native Japanese speaker who's reliant on translating software, I will always give the caveat that potentially I have not understood something correctly. So if anyone has any better information, I'm happy to report that as well. But based on what I have been able to find, it doesn't seem like there is an exception in this carve out. So at the NHK Cup, Hashimoto's illness drastically affected him, but somehow he still managed to score the 12th highest international all-around score in the world to date with an 83.364. Mind you, he also owns the highest score this year in the world from All Japan Championships, which was an 85.464. So right here's the whole picture painted. So Hashimoto comes to NHK Trophy, is like super sick with this mysterious illness. his coach is like, hey, please sit out. Like, you've already done enough. And Hashimoto's like, no, I want to make the team. In fact, I don't feel so well that I'm already pre-booking myself an appointment at the hospital on Sunday following the final day of competition. And I will go to the hospital after, but I'm going to compete these 2 days so that I can make the world championship team. So that's actually what happened. So while Hashimoto is not performing up to his best right now, Oka Shinnosuke comes in, and for day one, he nearly matches Hashimoto's world leading score from All Japan Championships. So at the first day of NHK Trophy, Shinnosuke got a 85.164. However, on the final day, he kind of tried to give the title away to Hashimoto because he botched his high bar routine really badly. But in the end, Shinnosuke did have enough of a buffer from day one to take the NHK Trophy title. And then because they were 1 and 2 in the all-around, both Oka and Hashimoto automatically earned name spots to the World Championships team. So I found this whole process really fascinating because having Hashimoto compete has garnered a lot of attention, and basically people are kind of torn into two main camps. And some people are like, it's May, like, give it a rest. World Championships aren't for 4 or 5 months. Like, let him rest. He's already proven enough. And then there's this whole other camp that are like, this is why they are the best in the world. There is no exceptions. There's no risk of favoritism. You have to very simply earn your spot. Like, if you don't compete, you're not going. And I kind of found myself falling squarely in the middle of these two ideas. Like, if the selection competition were, let's say, closer to the actual world championships, I think I would fall much more heavily along the lines of Team 2, because I think discretionary selection can at times ruin morale. And whether it's true or not, many athletes feel like discretionary selection is unfair and that it's biased. And you don't want to have, your backups, for lack of a better word, feel that they were being discriminated against or that the process was unfair, because you may need them. Like, they may be your alternates and you want to keep the morale high overall. That being said, Japan has made some less than ideal selections, particularly on the women's side, with choosing 5 months early when their best gymnasts absolutely were not ready to compete 5 months before a major competition. And you can think about this in terms of the US selection. So last year for the Olympic team, if the Olympic team selection had been 5 months before the Paris Olympic Games, Brody Malone would have been nowhere near ready post-injury to compete. And at that point, Koi Young probably would have been healthy enough to probably earn a spot onto the Olympic team. And you can see how that amount of time actually sort of shifted the conversation of who is actually going to be in the running for that Olympic team. Brody was obviously very viable in team finals. And if you had this, like, you compete or you don't, he would not have had the time to come back from that injury. So I think it's just something to keep in mind, especially when you have someone who is as competitive as Hashimoto. Like, in the US, maybe on the men's side, there isn't that one star that, oh my goodness, if this one person goes down, they're not going to be competitive or they're not going to be on the podium or things of that nature. But when you have someone like Hashimoto, who has a world leading score over everyone except his own teammate by like 2 points, you kind of like scratch your head and go, maybe do you carve out a little exception for him because he literally just got the highest all around score in the world 1 month earlier? It's something that I think about. Like, the women's selection had this kind of carve out clause for Simone, that if something had happened to Simone Biles where she was contagious and she shouldn't be competing so that she doesn't infect other people, but she would have been fine to compete at the Olympics, like, they had a carve out for her because if she didn't make the team, it really mattered. So I'm really curious how you view this situation. Are you team, oh my gosh, it's May, let him rest, what are you thinking? Or are you team, this is why Japan is the best in the world, there's no discretionary selection, the people compete who earn their spot, and this is what we should be doing because they're the best in the world, and maybe we should be following their selection procedures. So let me know either on Instagram or email me what you think that the US or Great Britain or wherever you're from, like which camp do you sort of fall into? The second major competition that happened this past weekend, this was a very, very busy week for following gymnastics, was the Chinese Championships. And the Chinese Championships are really interesting because they are treated like a major competition, like a European Championship or a World Championship or an Olympic Games. So there's a qualification for a team, all around, and event finals, and then there's separate day for the finals for each of those competitions. So very interestingly, like Hashimoto, China's star Zhang Boheng came into this competition like not in top form. And based on the translations that we've been able to get, it seems that he injured his neck right before the Chinese Championships. And he spoke about having significant problems just to try and spot the landings. Now, despite this injury, Zhang Boheng actually led the all-around in qualifications with an 83.197, and he also helped his province, Hunan, sit in first place after qualification ahead of the 5-time reigning champs, Jiangsu. So it would have been a really, 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 really big deal if Hunan had won, but unfortunately in finals they had a giant meltdown on pommel horse. They were behind like 5 points behind Jiangsu, and then Zhang Boheng ended up having to sit out 2 events due to his neck issues for Hunan. And so what ended up happening is Jiangsu just absolutely smashed the competition, and their team is led by Yo Hao, Sun Wei, and Shisong. And they ended up taking their 6th straight title. So very impressive for them. So Zhang Boheng did end up coming back to compete all 6 events in the all-around final, and he won over the 2024 Chinese champion Shisong. Now, when you look at the scores from this meet, things don't look great for China, but don't be fooled by this. So Zhang Boheng fell in the all-around final on pommel horse. And then some of the other competitors like Shisong and Lan Qingyu just weren't performing up to their best. And so he was able to look around and be like, I don't need to do my like best high bar routine or my most difficult high bar routine. So he ended up watering that down as well. So for event finals, of course, China has many athletes who compete with the best in the world or who are unequivocally the best in the world. I wouldn't say they're quite there on floor exercise and pommel horse right now. So Wang Haoyu won floor exercise with a 13.8, and then Han Yangming won pommel horse with a 13.766. Neither of these routines are particularly competitive right now, but these are very young gymnasts and certainly ones to watch along the way. Liu Yang was like the cream of the crop on still rings. He got a 14.966 in event finals, which is now the world leading score on still rings. Huang Mengqi won vault with a 14.566, and now this is a top 10 score with only Jake Jarman and Artur Dovtian having higher scores. So both Jake and Artur have competed at several competitions, so that's why they're filling up those top 9 spots. Zhou Jingyuan, his parallel bars routine, oh my goodness, I could just watch this all day long. I still, even after watching him for so many years, I cannot get over the height on his bavzar and his front 1 1/4. Like when he does his bavzar, he throws his arms completely to the side. He is like completely parallel to the parallel bars. It's unbelievable. Every time it's such a beautiful piece of gymnastics to watch. So he actually experimented with a couple different routines over the week of competition. He mostly competed a 5.9, but in team final, he ended up competing a 6.3, but that was actually his worst routine out of any of the routines he competed. In event finals, he ended up scoring a 15.233, which is by far the highest score in the world, and he did that with his 5.9 routine, not his 6.3 routine. Then on high bar, the favorite was Hu Shuwei. He is a former world champion on high bar, but he had a pretty disastrous routine in team finals. It was really, really unfortunate. So a little bit of a surprise, Huang Mingqi actually won high bar as well as vault, and he won that with a 13.833. Moving on to European Championships, I am so excited. I did get a credential and I am headed to Germany next week to cover European Championships, and I will be there live on site for men's qualification / team finals, mixed team cup, and all-around finals. I'm not going to do a huge preview here on this podcast because I was on Sam Oldham's podcast and we did a preview together. So go watch it on his channel. But I am going to go over a few things to note. So number one, the reigning European champions, Ukraine, it seems like are going to be competing. It was really unclear there for a little bit of time. There has been significant internal conflict, which I covered in a recent podcast with Sarah, that led national team member Nazar Chupirny to say, hey, if you don't release our coach from suspension, we're not going to the European Championships. So that would have been a huge deal if the reigning European champions didn't end up going. Now, based on the most recent social media post, it does look like they are in Germany planning to compete as a team. So my expectations for them, if they do compete, is I don't think that they're going to be in the running for the team title. My expectation is that Great Britain and Italy are going to be the two favorites for the gold medal, depending on the day. I had pretty high hopes for Turkey to be on the podium, maybe looking for that bronze medal position, but Emery Dodonley has withdrawn, and that's going to hinder them a bit. I think one team that may make the podium, which is going to be a little bit of a surprise for some people, is Switzerland, but they're looking pretty clean and in good form, and they retained a good amount of their team from the Olympic Games, so I think that they're going to be one to watch. Now, one of the most interesting things about the European Championships, and one of the reasons I really wanted to go cover this meet, is because there is a brand new competition. So the inaugural Mixed Team Cup is going to be happening on Wednesday of next week. So the Mixed Team Cup is going to be one man and one woman from a team. So like, let's use Great Britain. And for the men's side of things, this athlete earns their spot into the final. So the federation does not get to choose who is going to compete. It is the male athlete with the combined highest score on floor, parallel bars, and high bar, and then they will be paired with their female counterpart. So I'm really excited to see how this competition is going to work. It seems like it's set up pretty similar to Swiss Cup. So if you've watched those meets over the years where you have a number of teams that gets cut in half after the first round, and then after the second round it gets cut in half again, and then you end up with 4 teams at the end, and the bottom 2 teams end up battling it out for bronze, and then the top 2 teams end up battling it out for gold and silver. So I'm really looking forward to bringing you coverage, and my plan is to podcast after each of those days to give you my initial hot takes about what happened on the competition floor. A couple other really interesting things to look for. So Harry Hepworth may be debuting a handspring triple full vault that we saw in practice competition. I would be really excited to see this from him. So he's looking at ultimately competing 2 5-6 vaults. My guess is if he does throw this vault, it would just be in the final, not in the qualification, but I will certainly keep you updated if we do see this vault at the European Championships. And I think the battle between him and Jake Jarman and Artur Dovtyan is going to be oh so close for that vault title. On pommel horse, there's going to be a new European champion because Reese McClanagan has withdrawn due to injury. So 2 of the faces that I'm really looking forward to seeing, and they're sort of new faces. So for those of you who haven't been keeping track on this year's World Cup circuit, Gabriele Targhetta has his own skill now. He's from Italy, and his skill comes right at the end of his routine. It is so crazy. He does a one-handed on pommel work up to a dismount. Just really, really stunning, really, really difficult. And then Hamlet Manukyan of Armenia, he was the junior world champion on pommel horse. You have to see the leg height on his opening scissor. It is incredible and just really, really beautiful form. For still rings, interestingly, Harry Hepworth actually beat Courtney Tulloch, Artur Avestian, and Van Dovtyan in the practice competition that was held on Olivian. So go check out those routines if you don't know about them. I will say that Eleftherios Petronius and Ademasil are both set to compete, so it should be a strong competition on still rings regardless. I do want to say, when watching the videos on Olivian, probably the thing that was most shocking to me was seeing Jake Jarman compete a high bar routine in the practice competition, because he had told Sam Oldham at the British Championships that he was not going to be competing high bar this year. And I'm really curious to know if he's planning on doing that so he can have a shot at the inaugural Mixed Team Cup. So I'm hoping to be able to snag an interview with him and find out more about his plans for high bar this year. In sad news, this is going to be Andy Toba's final competition for Germany internationally. So pretty special that he's getting to close out his international career in his home country. He has certainly been a standard in Germany's lineup for such a long time, and we wish him well post this competition. So if you want a more in-depth preview of European Gymnastics Championships, please check out my episode with Sam Oldham. There are a few things that are slightly outdated, which is what happens when you record a week early. Like, for example, Sam was about to talk about how much he loves Niccolo Bartolini's floor routine. And I was like, I don't know if he's competing. He's not on the Italian roster, which he hasn't been this entire time. And then all of a sudden today, he has been added onto the Italian team. So things are constantly changing as people get injured or withdraw for whatever reason. So just keep a note that a few of the things in the podcast are a little bit outdated, and we will try and bring you the most up-to-date coverage from Leipzig. Moving on to some U.S. men's program news. So Tom Meadows, coach of Jonathan Horton, Raj Bhavsar, Chris Brooks, and Asher Hong, has left Cyprus Gymnastics Academy. Like, this very shocking news. He has done so much for men's gymnastics. He is widely considered one of the best, if not the best, junior coach for men's gymnastics in the country, and he has really been successful at every level. And I think a lot of people have been asking, well, why is he moving? Is it due to money? Is it, why would he leave this environment that he's been in so long? And if I had to guess, I would think someone who has done so much may be looking for some sort of new challenge. And he's moving up to Denton, Texas, which is actually the town I got my PhD in, to work at Achievers Gymnastics on their women's gymnastics program. So there could just be the challenge of wanting to move into the women's gymnastics space. I will say that if you look at his social media, like, you very clearly see he is in a relationship with someone who, if you click on her profile, you can tell works at Achievers Gymnastics. So it could just be something where, people have been dating long distance for some time and they want to end up being closer together. So for whatever reason he has chosen to move from Cyprus to Achievers, we certainly wish him well and success in this new endeavor. Now, I am going to mildly scream into the void for a bit about the U.S. men's program. So just bear with me. And by scream into the void, I mean I'm going to try as logically and neutrally as possible talk about some of the continuing issues that are happening in the hopes that we can bring accountability and make things better for the future. The U.S. men's program recently had a camp that was to choose the teams for the Pan American Championships and the World University Games. It was so weird because there was no email sent to media. There was nothing posted on the website about here are the attendees for the camp, which is a typical thing that happens. In fact, they just posted one for the women today. And it was just wild. And I even went back and double checked, like, did I miss something? Nope, it's just not there. And it is so strange to me that it makes me wonder, like, were their media team sick during that time? Like, is there a reason that there was no information sent out about this particular selection? But ultimately, it was just a little bit shocking. And the way most people found out that this competition was happening was because Asher Hong decided to video the competition on his Instagram channel. Not on the USAG Instagram channel, like, not on the YouTube channel, on Asher Hong's personal Instagram channel. So thank God for Asher Hong for giving us any insight into who was competing for this competition. I would like to see maybe a little bit more effort put into telling the media about this competition so that they can cover it appropriately, giving a roster for who's trying out for each team, because not everyone was even eligible to try out for each team. Not everybody wanted to try out for each of the different teams. So if you wanted to find this information, you had to go back to Asher Hong's Instagram live and rewatch it and hope that he had all of the right information. So I'm hopeful for the future that there will be more information provided, even if it is for these quote unquote smaller competitions, that we, the media, can get this information so that we can promote the sport as best as possible. Now, the other really kind of unfortunate thing that happened for this selection was there needed to be a tie-break procedure, because for the World University Games, there was a tie for the competition between two teams. The first team was Kai Umehara, Patty Hoops, Colt Walker, Alex Ntache, and Tate Costa. The second team was the exact same four at first: Kai Umehara, Patty Hoops, Colt Walker, Alex Ntache, and Karen Mandava. I don't know if it was selection committee or men's program committee, forgot to create a tiebreak procedure. Again, and it actually makes me want to pull my hair out. How is it 2025 and we still have selection procedures in this country for major competitions without tiebreak procedures? Now, that's not the only thing that recently happened in the U.S. men's community. So USA Gymnastics had to ask the senior selection committee to reselect the national team from Winter Cup. So if you missed this entire debacle, you can go back to episodes 59 and 60, where we go deep into the Winter Cup national team selection issues. So a grievance was filed and seems to have been upheld in some respect. That, to what extent, it's not explicitly stated, but in the men's documentation, it says, quote, "At the request of the USA Gymnastics Ethics and Grievance Committee, the Men's Senior Selection Committee has been tasked with reevaluating the discretionary selection spots from the senior national team selection held at the 2025 Winter Cup." So basically what they said was new evidence came to light, and they felt that the selection maybe didn't follow the procedures as originally stated. The grievance committee did. So apparently this new evidence that came to light, which we don't know what it was deemed irrelevant by the senior selection committee, because the exact same people that chose the first team selected, shock of all shock, the exact same team as before. So this is, again, why I tend to go back to the Japanese selection. I don't think that this application of discretionary selection by the senior selection committee has inspired confidence in the athlete and coaching staff within the realm of the USA Gymnastics men's program. And selections like this are what led to the athletes themselves asking for the men's program for an automatic lock option for the Olympic team, because they didn't want discretionary options. Hear that again. The athletes themselves did not want discretionary selection for the Olympic team. So in my reading of this reselection, I think the absolute most generous application to their reselection is very simply inconsistency of logic. So most people don't have any issue with the first three people who were selected via discretionary selection, which was Brandon Dane, Colt Walker, and Jun Iway. Most people are like, yes, the three of those make sense. It totally aligns with the criteria laid out by discretionary selection. However, several people in the community have many issues with the final two spots, and many feel that the selection committee did not follow their own selection criteria of, quote, in priority order for the discretionary selection, because if they had, the final two spots should have gone to, or at least been offered to, Crew Bold and Nardi Brady. Now, it's certainly possible that Nardi would have said no to that spot had it been offered to him, because he is at the age where he has the option of competing junior or senior. He had already been named to the Junior DTB Cup and may have wanted to make a name for himself on the international stage as a junior first. However, based on a strong reading of the criteria that were listed out, those were the two best options. So let's sort of dive into this reselection and the minutes that we have, which is all we have to go off of, and why I feel like the best reading of this is that you can say it's an inconsistency of logic. So the Senior Selection Committee wrote, quote, "The Senior Selection Committee did not feel that the Winter Cup event rankings were enough of a separator to name any of those athletes to the national team and decided to continue evaluating the results." So what this is referring to here is the discretionary selection criteria that indicates that event placement would be a priority of discretionary selection above D-score. Because remember, it says in priority order. So I find this logic, or perhaps a lack thereof, very odd. So what happened is they ended up choosing Patty Hoops and Alex Diab for the final spots. And they chose Alex Diab based on, quote, prior international experience, which up to that point was 1 World Championships with a fall and a handful of World Cup finals. So when you're trying to kind of like cover up potentially a poor selection, this is not about Alex himself, but a poor selection based on the rules that were written, you end up trying to get yourself out of a situation that you put yourself in and end up writing things that are at the very least inconsistent. So let's look at how they applied this earlier in the document. So let's look at Brandon Dang. Okay, remember we agree Brandon Dang should have been on the senior national team. This is not a question. But in their own document, they said, we choose Brandon Dang for the World Cup circuit because he won the event and had one of the highest D-scores in the world. So using their own logic, which they used to kind of like usurp and put Alex on the team, they could have said, well, even though Brandon won the event, it doesn't really matter. I mean, Patty and Brandon had equal D-scores, and let's look at international experience. Well, Patty has been to a World Cup before and Brandon Dang hasn't, because we're going to select him based on prior international experience. Which is ridiculous, because how are people supposed to get prior international experience if you don't send them to the option to get prior international experience? Like, Brandon Dang won a gold medal, but they based on how they're interpreting their own rules, we could have never known that Brandon Dang was that competitive on the world circuit, because they could have very simply just slapped Patty into that spot and said, he has prior international experience, so we're actually just going to send him instead. It should matter that Brandon won over Patty, just like it should matter that Crew and Nardi won their respective events. And yes, I realize it's a little bit of apples to oranges, as Brandon and Patty were on the same event, pommel horse, and all of the other athletes in question were on different events. But it does seem that there is an inconsistency in their own document about whether or not rankings are a differentiator or not. As always, this is not about the gymnasts that I have just named. It's not about any of them. This is about increasing accountability for the U.S. men's program so that athletes and coaches clearly understand what is expected of them and that the rules are being accurately applied. This goes for having tie-break procedures. This goes for how you're going to do discretionary selection, which, by the way, if you haven't, again, listened to some prior episodes, they've basically gotten rid of the in priority order. In fact, kind of snarkily, they wrote the selection criteria for national champions to say, quote, in no priority order. This is very smart of them, because then they're basically saying, we're going to choose whoever we want. Now, I don't know that it's the best way to increase trust, let's say on national team, but it is the best way for them to not get sued. And the other reason I think that this really matters is because the battle pommel horse in this country is about to get really, really tight, if it wasn't tight enough, because Olympic medalist and world champ Steven Edorosik has re-signed with Evo and is back in the gym. So you've got Steven Adderosic, Patty Hoops, Brandon Dang, Parker Thaxton, Ignacio Yockers. It's like, oh my goodness, the country who couldn't have a pommel horse worker to save their life is now overflowing with very competent pommel horse workers. And I just feel like how you choose who, because they're probably going to send 2 to Worlds, assuming they compete well at national championships. Who you end up choosing is going to say a lot about how the future athletes are going to trust you. So I digress. In terms of upcoming competitions, we already covered that next week is going to be the European Gymnastics Championships. It's also going to be the Canadian National Championships. So I'm going to be in Germany on Central European time. I am going to try my absolute hardest to keep up with the Canadian Championships. I have one of our amazing volunteers, Matt, who's probably going to be writing up some articles about the Canadian Championships so that we can stay up to date. But I'm just giving you fair warning that I may have to come back and watch some of those competitions later to then do a proper recap of Canadian Championships, just because unfortunately they are happening simultaneously and it's really, really, really difficult to keep up with 2 competitions at one time. So ultimately, to end this podcast, if you would like to help financially support our trip to Germany to bring you interviews, live insights, and more, a massive thank you to Jeffrey for your donation. This really helps us get to Germany, as it is a little bit expensive. We are almost entirely listener supported at this point, so these donations really do make a difference in producing a better quality product for you. The PayPal link is in every show note and at the bottom of every article on neutraldeductions.com, and you can donate via PayPal or Stripe. If you would like to financially support us but do not have liquid funds to do so, please go listen to this podcast on YouTube. We actually can get some funds from listening on YouTube, so that is really, really helpful as well. If you have any questions, comments, or insider tips, you can email us at neutraldeductions@gmail.com. That's all for this week. We'll see you next time.